I would get them lifting and I would get them walking. And I know I've said it already, but I think I like to set people up on to do things that create this snowball effect and they can affect other areas of their life. And I think, those two things right there can help affect sleep, can, make you stronger, help with bone density, with the weight bearing exercises and the walking. You're getting outside, you're getting sunlight, creating, better for your mood, and maybe go walking with a partner with your. I thought I just saw something about walking, how it can improve your relationship with your partner, walking together with them. So though that would be the 1-2 punch right there for that individual. I think if more people can just focus on those two things, a lot of other things will fall into place.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Sleep Like a Boss podcast. I have Brian on the show. I'm super excited. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We're going to talk about, I hate the word midlife, but I guess 40, 50, 60 is considered that, right? It's just, I'm 44
Yeah.
and midlife just makes me feel old, so
Oh,
I
we're both
don't.
the same age.
Yeah. See, and I don't know about you, but I just find midlife is, yeah, statistically, mathematically, it probably is, but it just doesn't feel like it.
Well, that's good if it doesn't feel like it. I know there are probably people who feel like they're maybe in their midlife. I mean, I feel like I'm younger than I am, but things sneak up on us pretty quick. So,
They do. They do. And that's kind of what we want to talk about, right? It's like you kind of go in your 20s, 30s, you're busy. In your 40s, you probably are still going, like you've settled in, maybe in relationships with children, houses, maybe starting to take care of people, of your
mm,
parents, maybe your parents are not. And then all of a sudden your body's kind of not the same anymore as it was. You might be gaining weight you're not understanding. You might be losing strength. There's pain here and there. You might not be sleeping well.
sounds
Um,
depressing.
it sounds depressing, but it kind of happens. And the more people, and I mostly talk to women, and I know you mostly work with men, but in the end, there is something happening biologically.
Hmm.
We're aging, right? Like it's something we can't prevent. And we want to really talk about like what's happening and what should we be doing? Because like that's something you really focus on in your work. Like how can we get better? How can we age well? And how can we do that in a way that we can pull through?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you hear about slowing aging down. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I find, especially with like middle-aged men, is like you talked about, they put their, and this is could be women, it could go either way, but like they sort of they might have a family and they've been busy with their career and they sort of put their health on the back burner. And not necessarily even like on purpose, but when you have to serve others and help and build a lifestyle and make a living, that just seems to go like it's like you don't prioritize your health like maybe you did when you were in your 20s. um but like I just recently took on a client. He's 45 and um you can tell that he had some good habits when he was in his 20s, but like we just said, it just sort of got away from him and now he's getting back into it. So it's never too late. I mean, if you have taken sort of a hiatus and put your health on the back burner, I think that like if you're in your 40s and 50s and even however old, it's never too late to just get back into it.
So, what are things that people come with to you? Like, what are the classic health challenges that you'd say start where people are like, oh, I think I really need to start doing something?
Yeah. Well, I would say that like specifically for men, a lot of times they don't like the way they look. You know, they don't like the way they look. They don't like the way they feel per se. And that's probably like the main reason I would say a lot of them come to me. But then also you start diving deeper and it's like, oh, well, they're not sleeping as well as that's when you come in. Right. Because I like to ask how they're sleeping as I meet with them because a lot of times they sort of like it goes hand in hand with how you're feeling and how you look, and if you're unable to maybe lose the weight that you want to lose, it's a lot of times because you're not getting quality sleep. So a lot of times it does come back to that. But yeah, so
Yeah. And I think you're so right, right? Like, and we see that so often. And I'm so glad that you look at that like that. Because so many weight loss coach, like in that case, like you're not a weight loss coach, but if people come to weight loss coaches with body image needs or they want to change something, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do calorie deficit and we're gonna work out. And you're still not sleeping because you have to fit that workout in and you have to make extra meals that are going to take from you. You're not going to, it like that maybe worked in our 20s, I think, but in our 40s, 50s, like it's not that straightforward anymore if we don't sleep. Like the body just doesn't have the capacity anymore, I don't think.
yeah, I mean, I think as you get older, especially if you're going to start working out and things like that, like recovery is just as important. And sleep is a big part of recovery. That's where we build a lot of our, that's when you release growth hormone and you sort of rebuild muscle. So yeah, if someone's not sleeping well, it's sort of counteracting a lot of the good stuff they might be trying to do in the gym, unfortunately. Yeah.
And maybe let's go to that gym part. What do we do differently? Is there something we need to do differently in our 40s and 50s than in our 20s?
Yeah, warm up more. No.
Okay, don't
Right.
injure yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A big thing is obviously avoiding injury. I think I don't, it's interesting. I just think about myself a little bit. Like my lifting hasn't changed as much since I started when I was probably 18. Now I'm 44. I've probably been lifting that long. And, I think I'm a little bit more conscientious about like the weight I'm using. I think it's important that you do want to lift some heavier weight and create some, tension on the muscles. I mean, you don't want it to be where you can just do 50 reps easy sort of thing. You want some tension there, but also it's proven that you can build muscle doing 30, 40 reps, so you don't necessarily have to be lifting and trying to lift like a 2 rep max sort of thing. So I think just getting started and getting the body moving and just getting into a routine and a habit and then sort of figuring out what works well for you. Some people, like for myself, I try to stay in like a rep range that works, typically like between 10 and 20. But you could build muscle with 30, 40, even 50 reps, but a lot of times that just takes too long. So, um, yeah, I guess not a ton, I don't think is going to be that much different as you get older. I think it's important that you focus on recovery and making sure that like you're feeding your body right and things like that. Like they all go hand in hand. So
Okay, and in terms of strength, because we hear a lot of that, if I look at it like from a women's perspective, and I'm on social media and I hear a lot about menopause going on, right? Like it's the big thing.
mhm,
And we're talking about osteopenia and we're talking about osteoporosis and prevention. And of course, muscle mass is critical.
mm.
And bone strength is critical. So resistance training is important. There comes the strength component. But do you think it is like how heavy do we have to lift? Like some of these things, I'm like, and then I look at people and maybe somebody like you who's been doing this for 20, 30 years. It's like, of course, you're already at a point where, like, if somebody starts now, they're never gonna get to that in any short period of time. And that can't be the goal either, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to be realistic. I mean, if you're just starting out, I think any type of weight bearing exercises is going to help with bone health, right? Like you'll hear individuals talk about, making sure that you lift like heavier weights, but I don't think you need to go heavy where like injury could come into play for individuals. It's like someone that hasn't sprinted in 20 years and then they start sprinting, like they're most likely going to pull a hamstring. Something's going to happen. So weight bearing exercises are important. I think also just like general walks are great for bone density, for mental health, for sleep, circadian rhythm. Like I just had a client who he's been coming to me for about 2 years, and we've been doing resistance training, and he's getting stronger. He's probably 65, and he finally started walking, and like and I just kept bringing it up. I didn't, until he was probably annoyed, but he's, and then he just started walking, 3, 4 days a week. And like, that really helped the weight fall.
Mm.
Like he was getting stronger. The weight was sort of hovering between just going for walks and then just being a little more conscientious about the things that he ate. those two things, and then it was like an extra 10 count came off like that. And he's in, mid 60s. It's not always that easy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Talking about being a little more conscientious about what we eat. What about nutrition as we get older? Yes, we cannot pound everything as easily as we could in our 20s. Like my body is not as forgiving as it used to be.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, nutrition, I think I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but like I think that for each meal you have, you should prioritize protein. Um, if you can average, let's just say 30 grams per meal, give or take. Um, and if you prioritize protein and then just, balance it out after that with, some whole food carbs and some healthy fats, and make sure you're cooking in healthy fats. I think that's a good one. Saturated fats like ghee or tallow or butter. We're gone are the days where we're going to be cooking in vegetable oils. But even though you go to a restaurant and that's all they do. So this is why I think another big tip would be to, if you can cook for yourself, let's just say 80% of the time. I think that can put you a step ahead for sure, health wise. And so I think especially as you get older, I know there's been studies where there's sort of like you have what's called muscle protein synthesis, where um, you stimulate, you work out and you want to help build muscle. Well, you have to create some type of protein synthesis, and then essentially, let's say you have 30, 40 grams of protein. Well, a lot of times with aging individuals, that there's sort of a muting effect where you might not respond as much to that protein as when you were in your 20s. So you do want to make sure that if anything, as you get older, you're like less prone to getting that protein in. So you can, sort of maybe try to get a little bit more than you would normally do when you were maybe in your 20s. And so, yeah, if you can, let's just say you're going to have 3 square meals. I just had not that long ago, Dr. Don Lehman on, who's like a big protein expert. He was at University of Illinois, and he just made the point that when you go to sleep, you're in sort of this catabolic state, and it's important that that first meal, it's sort of going to set you on track for the rest of the day, that you want to make sure that you prioritize protein in that first meal, and really make that the emphasis of it, sort of sets you on track and gets you out of that catabolic state so you can start building and growing, which is more of like an anabolic state.
Yeah, and I think to all the ladies listening, that applies to us too, right?
Oh yeah.
And this is not even, sometimes it's not even building muscle if you're not at that point yet where you're not working out and doing that, but even maintaining what we have. If we don't have enough protein, we can't do that, right? Because
Yeah,
like you're
for sure.
saying, it's the body
I,
just breaks it down for energy, for cortisol, for everything we're kind of running on. And so we need to put it back in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think that it also creates satiety, so it's going to keep you full longer. And, you know, a lot of people tend to snack a lot. I don't necessarily think you need to snack. If you're having nutrient dense quality foods for your meals, then I think snacking should be a minimum. A lot of times people, because I have people ask me, they're like, how can I avoid snacking? And I eat late at night. I'm like, well, what kind of meals are you eating? Like, if you're eating meals, we all know when we have a meal and it's just not that satiating of a meal, maybe it's something very processed. Um, it just leads to more hunger and having you snack late on things that you probably shouldn't snack on anyway. So,
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And if you actually try that, because a lot of people don't get 30 grams of protein with breakfast, but if you try that, you'll very quickly notice that even for lunch, it's like, oh, I just went without my 10 a.m. snack.
hmm
And then you consciously put more protein in for lunch, and then you can go quite far in the day. You have the energy, you don't feel like you need something. It just kind of happens.
yeah, and it might take some time, especially if you
Yeah.
haven't been eating as healthy. You got to sort of just, it doesn't happen overnight, right? But yes, for sure. I mean, if you just really focus on eating single ingredient foods and just double down on that, I mean, I think that's just going to create this snowball effect and create satiety. You'll start avoiding snacking more. You're just going to feel better, have more energy. And so, yeah, I mean, combining that with resistance training and walking, like we're done. We could end the podcast right now.
Everybody go outside and do that. And what's your thought on smoothies?
Oh, smoothies. I thought you were going to say smoking.
No, that I'm assuming I know the answer.
Um, Interesting. So I used to be like, so smoothies, I guess it depends what you put in them. But like if you're making them at your house, I think there's nothing wrong with them. One thing, like for example, my wife, who I for a while I don't think she was consuming enough protein, and she likes having coffee, and we just have like a coffee maker, so we make our own quality coffee. I'm like, why don't you just make it into a shake and just put it with like, yeah, I don't know, a scoop of collagen protein in there. You got your coffee, and then so you're getting your protein in the morning, and so this is one way we've added. And so I think that is for a convenience factor. If it works for you, then use a smoothie. I would always recommend eating whole foods, but like that doesn't work. And if people are really busy, then I think having a smoothie or from time to time, I think's something that you can take advantage of for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think also sometimes it's some people really struggle with eating in the mornings. And yeah, it's a stress thing, and
Yeah,
the the digestive system just isn't set up yet, and we'll get there. And so I sometimes think like a smoothie in the morning or like a protein, not like a protein shake, not these fake awful thingies, but like your
right.
own little smoothie
Yeah,
is
you
not a
make your
bad
own.
idea, right?
No, especially for a convenience thing, and if you're in a hurry. Also, too, I try to strategically have my walks after my meals. I just find I have two dogs, and we go on about 3 walks a day. So a lot of times I just space them when we go right after I eat, typically right after they eat too, and talk about just blood sugar stabilizing, digestion, that much better. And I've been starting to, it gets dark here now. Well, where are you in
In Canada,
Canada?
it is
Yeah, you're
dark
in
at like
Oh my God.
4:30 in the afternoon right now.
4:30, same thing for us. No, 4:35 ish. And so like I don't really take them out when it's dark because we're like in the woods. Not it, well, yeah, we have a lot of like animals. So no night walk. So I'll go on the treadmill just after I eat and just walk for 20, 30 minutes, maybe watch something or so anyways, if you really want to get strategic about it, going for walks after meals, I think is even that much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Um, what like talking about nutrition, strength training, walking, sleeping, um, does that affect hormones? I'm asking because you're working with men, and like with women, we see like the perimenopause, menopause. We know that with men, we also generally have changes in hormonal patterns as they age. Can you talk a little bit of that about that? Do you see that sometimes is like testosterone sometimes an issue with men? Especially when we're talking building muscle mass, is everything you've just outlined, is that something that could help?
Definitely could help. I think every case is a little bit different. And like for me, for example, I have a decent amount of testosterone, but um I do find that like if I'm not sleeping well or if you have an individual that takes a break from lifting, I think building muscle probably is the one of the best predictors of like maintaining or increasing testosterone naturally, right? There's HRT and
Yeah.
stuff like that
Yeah.
out there, but um I think quality sleep and resistance training are probably the two biggest movers when it comes to testosterone. I think everyone wants like, especially males want this like magic thing to happen. Um, and eating right, right. I know there's been studies around like zinc helping with testosterone and things like that. So like, shellfish or oysters couldn't hurt, right? So yeah, those are the big levers when it comes to maintaining or maybe even increasing testosterone.
And even for women, right? Like I always like to point that like we have a ton of testosterone. We have
Sure.
way more testosterone than estrogen. We just don't ever talk about it. right? And if we are low in motivation, if we can't build muscle, if all these things happen and our diet's right? Like there is potentially a hormonal aspect in that too. But I think also for women doing that strength training, that eating well will definitely positively affect that as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned to me, and maybe one of the questions before we started the podcast was like influencing your partner. I think the best way you can influence your partner is by just doing it. Like if you want your partner to exercise, like then you should do it yourself. Lead by example sort of thing. I think that's really important. And I mean, even like with my wife, she was a big runner, and since she met me, like I strength train a lot, and I just now she starts strength training, right? So it's like with your kids, right? If you want your kids to be healthy, well, if you eat and work out, they're going to see that and they'll do that as well. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the questions I had originally for, yeah, really this one partner starts or wants to start changing something, right? Like the one thing is how can we support each other? Um how can I as a partner support my husband who maybe goes to the wants to do something is not happy. Yeah, the one thing is do it yourself. I think the other thing is really supporting, right? Like I find making changes in your lifestyle is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if
Yeah.
you have somebody who cheers you on, that's a lot easier than um, if there is no support around you, no support system available, I think.
I mean, no doubt about it. Yeah. I think another big thing is not only with like family or your partner, is surrounding yourself with people who you want to sort of like who you want to like mirror, right? Like just putting yourself in, that's what made CrossFit so big, right? Like CrossFit is this a community first atmosphere there, and you're surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and are healthy and doing a lot of good things. Some people might disagree with CrossFit. I'm not a big CrossFitter, but I'm just giving an example that like I think before I started sort of doing all this stuff with one-on-one coaching and stuff, I used to do groups. I used to have groups of like anywhere from 3 to 10 people at a time would come work out, and it was so motivating, and there was all different ages and groups, and I would say like strength levels. But like you're not if you're I've had 20-year-olds come in, and there's a 55-year-old that's just outlifting them and outworking them, so that's motivating in itself. So I think if you can, a lot of people join a gym, which is like one step, but I think that making sure that you either have someone to help you, like hold you accountable, or like a workout partner, or 3 or 4 of them, I think can really sort of spur you on as well.
And I think, interestingly enough, because I wasn't into strength training at all for a long time, I was into cardio a lot. That was my
Sure.
thing. Um, and I was very intimidated just by the thought of doing
Mm,
that. And I think for women, it's maybe even if it, I don't know if it's different. Maybe men are also intimidated if they go there, and the guys who've been doing this forever and look different are intimidating a bit. So I did it first. I tried like a female only thing that actually didn't even work, and then I hired a male personal trainer,
mm,
um, and which worked really well. And I was impressed by the atmosphere in those gyms. If you go to it, like it wasn't like a chain, it was it was more private, smaller kind of gym with only people went there who did like weightlifting and boxing. They had a boxing ring. They are so supportive.
mm.
They are so nice. It's not, you're not looked at as, oh, look, she has no clue what she's doing. She's doing this all wrong. She's only lifting, I don't know how many pounds, but not many.
Mm.
It's the opposite. It's you're doing something for your health. We're here to support you, which I thought was great.
Yeah, yeah, I commend you. I mean, like you said, I think sometimes people get intimidated, but like a lot of times it's just taking that first step. Like for you, right? I'm sure you were like, oh, I don't know, this, that. I mean, and then once you got into it, you're like, oh, this is, everyone's supportive. We're all working towards a similar goal as far as just getting stronger, and you're just starting at a different point,
Exactly. And I think
right?
yeah, and that's the thing. And a lot of those people are extremely fit, but yes, also they have put the time and energy in to get there, right? And they didn't get there overnight either. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, I always say it's all about consistency. So like look at whatever you're doing and you're like, can I do this over the long term? And if you just don't see yourself doing it over the long term, it's probably not the right thing. That's not to say that you can't change. I've changed stuff through the years, but like, people would look at me and they're like, well, you must work out every day. I'm like, well, actually, no. For a while, I was working out 3 days a week, and now I'm at like 4 days a week, but that's that like that. I'm not like 6, 7 days a week. And I've just been consistent over time.
Yeah, and I think that's you're right, that's key, but that's sometimes that's hard, right? Because if we look at how the human brain functions, you're motivated. You're like, oh, those 10 pounds need to come off and I really need to work
Mm.
on my posture or whatever it is. And then you hit like 4 weeks and you're trying to really put like, is there to motivate you? And then you hit the 90 days and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to like I really don't want to keep doing this. Then life comes around and things happen, and you're like, how do you keep that as a priority?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the longer you do it, the better chance you have it be a part of your life. Like it just becomes habitual, like anything else, brushing your teeth or going to the bathroom. It just be. So the longer you can stick it out, I think then you have that much greater of a chance to just do it for the rest of your life. That's not to say that things come up, and I think that, and it's okay. I think it's important to, just be aware of those things and like that's why I think you want accountability in some point. And, like you said for yourself, Annika, like having a trainer, maybe if you find yourself falling back into your old habits for 90 days after 120 days, then you probably still need accountability. You need someone to coach you. Like for me, for example, I don't need that, but maybe at one point I did need that when I first started out. So I think everyone at a certain time, when it sort of clicks, who knows? It could be different times for different people, is going to need some type of coaching or some type of environment that's going to help them continue on, if
Yeah,
that makes
and I
sense.
think, is it like for me, it was also this starting slow. And by that I mean like he was pretty good at like looking at how was my recovery. Oh, it was good.
Right.
Like
Well,
we're
yeah, I
not
mean,
gonna overdo it, and we're doing a few things, and we're consistently doing those and seeing progress in how I do those things. And then we build on that momentum because I'm having success and I'm not after every session, oh my God, I can't move for 3 days kind of thing.
right. And that's key. Yeah, like that's a smart trainer. He knew that you were just starting out, obviously, and didn't want to like blow you out of the gym and have you be sore for 4 days and not be able to sit on a toilet. So like,
Exactly.
right.
Well,
That's smart. Yeah, that's smart. That's the way to do it. You definitely want to start small and slow and just get little wins. You might have a little bit of soreness, but nothing that's going to keep you away um, from the gym the next time you come in. That's
yeah.
important.
Um, Tell me a little bit about because you have a system and it's called the step ladder system.
Yeah, I was just reading my own book last night. There we are. Isn't that fun?
Can you?
I fell asleep. No, I'm
You
kidding.
did. Well,
I
there's
always
a
let me tell
study,
you.
6 minutes. There's a new study. Six
Oh,
minutes of reading at night in bed is on average what it takes for people to fall asleep and actually have a good sleep. So,
oh yeah. I mean, sleeping in bed for me, it doesn't matter the book. Yeah, it. I'm usually pretty good with falling asleep, but yeah, I can see six. I'm probably about 6 minutes. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's like
about right. Yeah.
a couple pages.
If I really want to read a book, I have to read in the morning.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I mean, the stepladder system is sort of just a culmination of my experience over the last 20 years and like just putting it into a sort of step-by-step approach, and a lot of things we already talked about, but like one of the things that we do initially with clients is create some type of clarity, um sort of understanding like, well, why do you want to improve your health, and then you know creating like a full baseline assessment of where is this person at. And then, because if you don't know where you're at, then you don't really, it's tough to sort of have goals. So one of the things we do, not with everybody, but with a lot of clients, is like a DEXA scan or some type of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to use a DEXA scan, but sort of the gold standard if you want to know body composition, lean mass, fat mass, bone mass. And it's a good place to start. So step one is creating clarity. Once you have that, then it's about a little bit about what you mentioned, which starting slow. I think that's important, but also creating wins.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can create early wins, that creates momentum. And so typically we try to find like 1 to 3 habits, maybe it might even be one major culprit that sort of might make the biggest impact on that individual and help them sort of overcome that sort of low hanging fruit that's getting in their way. So small changes in the beginning, and then we go into like, okay, well, activity upgrade is the next step. Sleeping like a superhero is the next one, and then stress management, and last is just nutrition and meal timing. So sort of 6 pillars, if you want to say, that we would go through for everybody.
Oh, great.
No.
Um, wow. And then do they do like a DEXA scan again at a certain point?
Yeah, I would say after like 6 months,
Hmm.
yeah, just to see where they're at, because the scale doesn't tell everything really at all. It doesn't tell, because you could be putting on muscle and your weight might stay about the same or even increase for depending on the person and what they're, where they're at. But yeah, so the scale doesn't tell much. So yeah, we DEXA scans doesn't have to, there doesn't have to happen every month, but I would say after 6 months is probably a good place to reassess.
Doesn't DEXA scan, when you do, it looks at bone density, right?
Correct.
So it would tell you your risk level of
Yeah.
where am I on my way to osteoporosis?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. I get them for myself every so often just to see where I'm at as well. It literally takes 10 minutes, pretty easy to do. And yeah, bone density, lean mass, fat mass, visceral fat, main ones that it does. And it sort of shows you um how even like it is, like say you have one leg that's stronger than the other, it'll show each side of the body, and if you're symmetrical or not, which most of us aren't.
I was
But
gonna say, which most of us aren't, and depending on what kind of sports you've been engaged in, you could be very,
yes,
very
one-sided.
leaning to one side, right? Um, Interesting. Yeah. And do you see improvements? And of course, I'm assuming body composition and everything we would see for sure. Bone density?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Bone density gets affected, especially obviously if you've been resistance training that time period. um And yeah, I mean, the big one is visceral fat, and that one is obviously a trickier one, but um, it that's for men. That's where they carry a lot of their fat. And I know with women, it's probably more like in the hips, if I'm correct.
And like midsection, overall, like
Midsection.
cortisol,
Hmm.
higher inflammation, weight. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think it's you know you don't need to do a DEXA scan. You can do normal measurements. And I think that in itself can suffice, if you don't have one in your area. But I do think having some type of like baseline to start with. I also too recommend clients to just like track a little bit in the beginning what they're eating.
Hmm.
I think that's important. If you've never tracked, do it for a week and just write down everything you've had. Or, there's so many great apps nowadays where you can track, see how much you're eating.
And it is
Uh,
interesting. And I was like, I don't do that. I don't, even as a health coach for a while, I was like,
mm,
I don't want my clients to track because I don't want it to cause stress. But it is,
mm,
and we just do food journal now. So we don't necessarily track,
mm,
we don't weigh the food. But if you weigh and I've done it for myself now though, just out of curiosity, isn't it interesting?
mm,
Isn't it interesting? And I'm not I wouldn't consider myself a snacker really. I eat very, very well from like Whole Foods and all that. But isn't it interesting? Even the fluctuations in intake, like amount of calories on days with working out and not working out. And for
Hmm.
women, it's also cyclic. I think there are days where we just need more calories than
Hmm.
others. And this protein journey, I think, has been the most insightful. Really, the higher your protein,
The what? I'm sorry.
the higher my protein,
Oh, yeah.
the better mood, energy,
Hmm.
less, like you said, less snacking. And I think the other thing is that is fat. I find, and for women, I think I'm all pro healthy fat because and cholesterol is a good thing because hormones are made from it, right? Um, but I think we often sneak in so much fat that
Hmm.
is actually not helping in the midlife area. Like that tablespoon of almond butter and, the smoothies with the almond butters and the pumpkin seeds here and the nuts there and it's all healthy granola bars. It's just all like
Hmm.
I have a client, she's in her early 50s and she's like, um, I would also actually like to lose some weight because whatever I do is not coming off. And then we had that, and I tracked with her because she's like, I don't
Hmm.
want to track. I'm like, go ahead, let's do it together for a week. We both do the same thing. And she did. I'm like, the amount of fat in you, like it just feels from even without looking at it, it just feels too much. Like it just, she's like, you're right. And I never knew and she's one of those healthier, the MCT oil in the coffee in the morning, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Then all the nuts and seeds on the granola. Then the here and there, and it just adds up.
No, you're right. I think as much as we all hate, we love the taste of different nuts. um, and me too. Like, I mean, I could probably like they're so easy to overeat, and it's just you can, like you said, you could take in so much fats from eating different nuts that you just we try not even to buy them anymore. Um, some nuts are better than others as far as health is concerned. I mean, I used to have pistachios quite a bit.
No.
Yeah, big fan of pistachios. But you know what? We haven't really bought it. It hasn't been. I mean, even though it's not really even a nut, but peanut butter. Like who doesn't like peanut butter, right? Yeah, yeah, right. So you're right, though. I think that like especially people who maybe are more like vegetarian, vegan, they go down that road of like granola, nuts, and it's like that those can just add up over time and not necessarily so healthy. So if you can, like you said, start eating just like quality protein and lean into that and not try to overeat on like these, there's so many different nut snacks out there nowadays, right? Like these mixes and stuff. I mean, that stuff can just is just addicting.
Oh, it is was. And actually I did listen to a podcast the other day. They had a nutritionist on from NutriSense, the CGM
Oh,
company.
sure. Yeah, was it? Yeah, I think was it Saladino's on Saladino's
No,
show?
I don't even remember which one it was, but a
Casey Means.
she was
You could, yeah.
referencing a study that they did not do. It's a long-term study that somebody else did, like a big university, I think. Like the if you actually eat the whole nut, like you eat an almond, you chew an almond, your body
Mm,
actually only absorbs about 30% of the nutrients and calories.
mm,
Like the whole process is so mechanical, right? And it doesn't get broken down as complete. So the absorption isn't as. However, if you eat the butters, because somebody
mm.
has kind of pre-digested
Oh
it for
yeah,
you,
yeah,
um,
right. They're
you're
mixed up
doing your
already.
body like that's a whole different story in terms of satiety, potentially even in terms of calorie intake, in terms of blood sugar impact. Like it was really interesting. It
Mm.
was really, really interesting.
And it's probably similar to the fact that like if you're if you're juicing, right? Like you're taking a lot of the fiber out of it and you're not chewing it yourself. So it's easier to overconsume that than it is to eat 20 oranges.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could take
Exactly.
20 oranges and juice them and, drink it. So,
Yeah. Um, if somebody had wanted to start, they're like, it's time. I feel my body is not like it was 10 years ago. I want to start somewhere. I'm not doing that much right now. Where would you have them start? What would be like your one, two things?
Like if they came to me, what would be like the one or
Yeah.
two thing?
Yeah.
I would get them lifting and I would get them walking. And I know I've said it already, but I think I like to set people up on to do things that create this snowball effect and they can affect other areas of their life. And I think, those two things right there can help affect sleep, can, make you stronger, help with bone density, with the weight bearing exercises and the walking. You're getting outside, you're getting sunlight, creating, better for your mood. And maybe go walking with a partner I thought I just saw something about walking, how it can improve your relationship with your partner, walking together with them. So though that would be the 1-2 punch right there for that individual. I think if more people can just focus on those two things, a lot of other things will fall into place.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Walking is so underrated. And I think we don't have to necessarily do the 10,000 steps a day thing. Like there's so many studies that show it's actually way less the point of diminishing returns. But just get out there, start
Mm-hmm.
and get further every day the way you feel like it. You're gonna see that it feels good and you're just gonna want to have more of it.
Yeah, I always like seeing, like when I go on my walks with my dogs, like a lot of times you'll see the same people. It's the same
Mhm.
people every time with their dogs, right? So
Mhm.
you make these dog walking friends. But there are some people that, and it's very rare, that walk on their own without a dog, without, and it's like I always say that's a nice thing to see because I don't see enough of that, but it's always the same people. So, it's just yeah, I'm sure I'm missing people, right? Like, but for the most part, you get a good idea who's doing it and who's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easy to do and easy not to do, right? And
Yes.
so yeah,
Great. Well, this has been such a good conversation, Brian.
yeah. Thank you for having me on. Um,
Thank you. Where can people find out more about you?
so I actually have a newsletter that I've been building up, and that's on my website. They can go on briangryn.com and just sign up for the newsletter. It comes out every week. I don't like hound you with that tons of stuff, but we do like newsletter a week. And so briangryn.com is the best place. You've been on my podcast, the Get Lean Eat Clean podcast. And gosh, I'm on episode 406 right
Wow.
now. Yeah. Long time. So I do one interview with like an expert like yourself, and then just like a 10-minute sort of breather episode, micro podcast. So yeah, Get Lean Eat Clean podcast and briangrin.com, best places.
Awesome. And we will link everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for having been on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. And here's my red light that we were talking about before.
Yes,
So if you can get yourself in front of some red lights, because we're inundated by blue lights all day long, right? That would be
absolutely. And we even have
the
our
place to
super bright lights, right, for the
for the podcast.
podcast. So a red
I
light next to you is great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you for having me on. It's been great, and yeah, I look forward to having this come out. This will be great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.